What's up, guys? EJ Kendall joining me here for another edition of our Young Justice episode recap and review. Today we're talking about episode 10 of season 4 of Young Justice Phantoms. This is Nomed Esir. Kendall, we're pretty much in the thick of this Zatanna story arc. It involves the Lords of Order and the Lords of Chaos. Some of this being told in the present with the issue with Child and Flaw causing chaos, so to speak, on Earth. And this kind of past story that takes place, millennia ago, involving Vandal Savage in his, kind of first iterations as a man, kind of dominating civilizations and kind of creating kind of what we know of the DC universe that we see here on this show. We got a lot more from both ends. I think the I say Vandar because he's a Vandar Aang in the primitive time. He evolves this episode into Varjot. So I've enjoyed the different variations of his name, but in some ways that angle is almost just as been just as prevalent as the A story, which is of course involving Child and Flaw and Zatanna.
Yeah, it's been interesting. I mean, last week I mentioned that the part of the episode that was most interesting was the Vandal Savage stuff, and I continue to feel that way going into the second episode. I mean, I feel like that was, the backstory. They teased it with Atlantis last week. We talked about that a little bit, but they really now fleshed out what the origin of Atlantis was in this universe, and it was interesting. Yeah. It made sense. It fit the story they were telling, but this B plot wrapped really nicely into the main plot. I mean, I guess you could argue it's kind of similar to how they utilized the League in the last arc, where they played a role. They weren't really the focus, but it tied into them and it tied back to them, and the stuff dealing with them tied back to the original A plot, like you mentioned. So, yeah, I mean, this was a lot of interesting context, a lot of interesting subplots, but some good stuff with Clarion as well. So we'll get to all that.
Yeah, and then there's a C plot as well involving McGann and her trip back to Earth with John and her sister. So we'll have plenty to talk about that as well. So a lot to get to on this show. And let's start. And to be honest, we call it the B plot, but they started the episode with Vandar Aang. That was where this episode began. They started with kind of leaving us where he left off with this deal he made with Clarion, and essentially how he was able to see Atlantis kind of rise up with Clarion, allowing him to give him those thousands of years to figure out why, show him his worth essentially, and show him why a deal with him made sense. And we learn that after leaving Atlantis to his grandson, who of course is Arian, the first lord of Atlantis. And this is, again, still Atlantis being above ground. This is not an underwater kingdom under any circumstances. And he takes pride in this grandson because it is the first offspring he's had that is an immortal like him. So he comes back 200 years later. His grandson is still in charge. His grandson still looks young in his prime. And he is bestowed the magic crown that is given to him by the Lords of Order. This is kind of stuff I was mentioning last week, where we have agents of order as well as Lords of Order. The Lords kind of choose the agents. Arian seems to be maybe the first agent of order, though maybe you can even argue Vandal is, but we'll get to that a little later. Arian certainly is one of the first agents of order, and he uses this power of this crown and this magic that was given to him by the Lords of Order to create this kind of utopia of Atlantis. It looks like a Wakanda, basically, the way they kind of show it.
Very similar, right?
The technological advances, and Wakanda is set in like the current time. I mean, this is set in prehistory almost. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're talking about dinosaurs and stuff, and they have flying cars and everything. I mean, it's really kind of wild to see. It kind of sets up this power struggle as Vandal kind of sees his grandson rise and realizing that his end goal is still to be the number one dog on top. What did you make of how they kind of set up the Atlantis storyline in this episode and the backstory to start? I thought it was very compelling.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I mean, it was interesting. I mean, the Aryan character is another one that is a Wikipedia, a DC, encyclopedia kind of character that you can dive into, and he's got a history.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, I think that those characters that again may not be household names, but if you know them, it's a really cool cameo.
Right.
If you don't know them, you do the research. I think it adds context to how you enjoy it and how you understand what's going on and why these characters are used. I think again I mentioned it last week, but it reminds me of how you see those characters kind of show up in the Arrowverse. You have these characters that seem like freak of the week or one-off characters that you realize, oh, this character's this guy from this comic, and now we got him come to life. So getting to see an Aryan character that isn't prominently featured,
right.
And then seeing him in this is cool. And there's other characters that we'll talk about later that got a similar introduction to the Justice universe. But yeah, no, I thought that this backstory was interesting. I thought, obviously, Vandal Savage added more sort of teeth to his character.
Yeah.
Being that he was the one that sunk Atlantis.
Right.
Again, this. I keep talking about a pitch for a Vandal Savage movie. I don't know.
I mean, this is it right here, baby. I mean, this is everything you'd want.
Imagine including that.
Yeah.
Imagine including that in the movie, where this guy played a role in the sinking of Atlantis. Yeah, I mean, terrific writing by Weissman. The explanation of why the Atlanteans are the way they are and how they're essentially metahumans, that they're not necessarily like aliens or anything.
Right.
They're explaining their backstory. I mean, I thought it all worked. I thought it was all cool. So I thought a great job by Greg Weissman there.
Yeah, and it kind of spoke to the complex kind of moral compass that is Vandal Savage and the way he sees the world. He's someone who takes pride in what his grandson's able to accomplish, but then also sees the kind of end goal he wants and is willing to do whatever it takes to get there, even if it means trusting someone like Clarion, who goes far and beyond what his orders were in terms of sinking only the Atlantis capital. Instead, he sinks the whole continent. And Vandal,
isn't that crazy? Atlantis was was another continent.
I know.
On the face of the earth.
Yeah, it looked like it was between Africa and South America. It looked like when I saw the map, which is an interesting place for it to be as well. I thought that was really compelling stuff, man. And I thought it really helped tie the story together as to why someone like Clarion has such a great use to Vandal. I think we'll get to more of whether or not Clarion has use for Vandal. We know Vandal has use for Clarion, but is that a reciprocal relationship? And I think that's kind of the crux of Child and the rest of the Lords of Chaos's issues with Clarion when she kind of confronts him on the lack of work he's done on Earth to cause chaos. He's kind of just laid at the feet of Vandal Savage. But once again, kind of seeing Clarion in that kind of like more raw state. I mean, you could tell he just was a different person back then, more ruthless, more chaotic, no pun intended, and just more cutthroat person than he is today. He's obviously still a very evil dude. And we say evil, not knowing that he's an essence of chaos. Maybe evil isn't the best word, but you know what I mean. Like, he's definitely a bloodthirsty,
I think some of the Atlanteans will probably love it.
For sure. But definitely, kind of a bloodthirsty dude. And in the present time, that he's not quite that. He's a lot more jovial. He's kind of a lot more of a clown. And I think Child in the Lord's Chaos see this, and she kind of explains that, and they've had enough of him.
So what's your comp for Clarion, for obviously more obscure of a character, but in mainstream, media, not Deadpool, But somebody like that's kind of crazy, but we look at him and say not a pure villain. Like Joker's too evil.
I mean, it's almost like Mr. Mixaplex to me. Like that's like the kind
Yeah,
of energy he gives me a little bit. A little more, maybe a little more dangerous, maybe a little more. You know, like he puts a little more tear in your heart, but
probably a bigger joke, more,
right.
But yeah, I can see that.
But I mean, Clarion is talking to. I mean, he's talking to a cat while he's fighting this, demonic figure who has the powers of all the lords of chaos, and like, it's like part of he's like, is he really taking all of this as seriously as he should? So that's why someone like Mr. Mixaplex kind of came to my mind is immediately as someone how I would compare him to. Of course, that's staying within the DC universe there. I will say I thought that again the explanation of the Atlanteans and Savage essentially taking this kind of blind bet. I mean, he doesn't know. He is not a scientist, But again, it kind of goes back to this kind of knack he has as a kind of tactician and a strategist. This thought that, well, if I have all this offspring who are descendants of me, and I'm the first metahuman, then there's got to be some of these people that could breathe underwater, and I can't be that powerful if most of this land is covered by water, which is again speaks to like kind of a elevated kind of thinking, like who thinks like that, that kind of, and also kind of maybe like obviously a sociopathic thinking, just of like this like that world dominance means like literal world dominance. Like it doesn't just mean land; it means sea. It means everything that is on this rock that we call Earth that needs to be dominated by him. He says, if I don't have anybody that can control that in any way, or I can't control that in any way, then what's the point? So it leads him to again do this kind of basically genocide of his home village. This small village that he cultivated that became this utopia, and it also speaks to kind of like his like it kind of speaks to like his arrogance too. Like these are his offspring, his grandson of course is a descendant and stuff, but he didn't do any of the work to create Atlantis into the utopia that it became. That was all Aryan. You know what I'm saying? That was the magic he received from the lords of order, and yet this guy thinking like, oh, you don't have that work, all right, well, this doesn't matter, we need to kill all these people because this isn't good enough. It speaks to his level of arrogance as well, that I think is important, and he's a very complex figure, and when you lay back the layers of the onion, you kind of peel back the layers of the onion rather, I think you come up with kind of more interesting things to think about him.
Yeah, I mean, even the fact that after his plan had succeeded but gone overboard, he was sort of remorseful about the fact that Clarion, went across the line, that not even he would have crossed, and it shows you that he still had a bit of perspective. He just, it's kind of like Thanos. He just wanted to eliminate. He just wanted to create balance. He didn't want to, eliminate everybody. And so that was very interesting.
And it's funny because I feel like we always compare Darkseid to Thanos, but in some ways I do feel like when it comes to like their way of how they view the world and populations, I mean Vandal Savage to me is much more of a comparison than Thanos is. I mean, Darkseid is to me. Like I think Darkseid is way more about like dominance for the sake of dominance, where as Vandal Savage says at the end in his conversation with Dr. Fate, like whatever you think about me, I have the Earth's best interest in heart. And even if like that's kind of not really true, part of it kind of is. Like Darkseid has no one's best interest in heart, including Earth or any place he's involved with. So and Thanos in his way he thinks is also the same way. Like he thinks that this is the way civilizations and people that are suffering can thrive through his insane means, and Vandal Savage kind of has a similar kind of outlook.
Since we're on the post credits, since we're on the topic of Vandal Savage, the credit scene that involved Vandal Savage, I thought it might have been my favorite credit scene of them all.
Yeah, and we can go. I mean, and shout out to people watching the video. When we do our podcast, sometimes we go out of order and stuff, and a free forming conversation. Let's just go wherever we're gonna go. So let's talk about that. So, especially because the way the episodes are constructed, like everything we're saying has like almost it's connected to the current stuff, but it's not spoiling it.
Credit scene
doesn't spoil anything that's involved with the current stuff. So we'll talk about what's happening on current Earth 16 in a second. But in the post credit scene, after we learned first of all that this narrator that we heard from just last week and continued into this week to start this episode was actually Vandal Savage, which was interesting. I don't know why I didn't know that or think about that, but nonetheless, it is Vandal Savage. It's him actually telling a story. He's talking to Dr. Fate. They are both standing there in Dr. Fate's and he talked to Nobu really, but in the what did they? I forgot what they called it. I wrote it down, but his
sanctum.
No, the sanctum is where blood was, and Etrigen, who we'll get to later. Tower of Fate. There you go. I was looking for it in my notes. They're in the Tower of Fate, and he's saying, basically, I'm doing this. I'm telling you this story because you need to realize that as bad as you think I am, I can control Clarion. I can't control this crazy.
And Nobu calls him father,
which is very interesting. I don't know where that comes from, and there's no canon.
His son.
Yeah, and there's no canon that suggests. So I don't know. Who knows where that is? We'll have to learn more about. Hopefully, we learn more from further backstories here. But he says, "Look, I can't control this child. I can control Clarion, and you're too old to fight, child. So we got to figure something out because this isn't going to work out." It leads us then to this post-credit scene where, despite that conversation he has, maybe he wasn't. It sounds like to me he wasn't he wasn't convinced that Fate and Nobu were capable or willing to help him in the way he needs. So he tells Cassandra Savage to execute Order Lifeboat. It is essentially a kind of a fail-safe kind of operation that involves the light and sending boom tubes to every light member and their ally that they deem fit, so they can get off of Earth if need be. He tells Cassandra to send one to Raish, a former light member, and his family members. He says
although I don't think they're going to use it.
And he says, I don't think they'll take it, but I think it is important to give the offer. It shows you the respect he has for the Ancient One, which I think is, again, an interesting concept and an interesting kind of nugget to think about. He orders them to secure operations in Markovia and United Malaysia. Of course, those Markovia operations we were briefed on in the last episode, where they were talking about the plan they had with how they're influencing Brion with the metahumans, and that anything that's important from the contents of his history crave all need to be taken off world. Everything that's important, anybody that's important, needs to be taken off world and into the war world until the situation on Earth is handled. So again, I think it's a pretty unique and ultimately wise storytelling tool from Wiseman and Brandon Vietti to kind of heighten the sense of urgency for what is going on Earth. You see someone like Child and Flaw, two characters we're not too familiar with. A lot of people who maybe follow DC Comics aren't too familiar with. We know Zatanna, but we see these kind of younger magical figures, and we might think, okay, Justice is not involved, Superman's not afraid, so is this really that big a deal that this thing is, that this child is, threatening to cause, this, chaos and destruction? This is kind of the scene, I think, to tell you what's happening is very dangerous and very bad, to the point where Vandal Savage is like, all the baddest dudes on Earth, get them the hell out of there, because this isn't going to end well potentially.
I look at I mean, I definitely looked at that scene as, I don't think anything will necessarily come of it. I think a lot of it is more of a, like all of these credit scenes have been almost like additional material, almost like epilogues to each episode, and I think that they view that as like a footnote to show what is Vandal Savage, how's he processing all that's going on. Clearly, like you said, he doesn't think, clearly he's not fully confident that this is going to end well, and it shows you that Vandal Savage, he stayed immortal for hundreds of thousands of years for a reason.
Right.
Exactly. He's got contingency after contingency he's he's got a checklist. Already has a second world that he's ready to transport to outside of Earth. I
Right.
mean, we don't know anything about that,
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
and he's already marking down the contingencies that yeah, get this one off world, get that one off world. Yeah, race. He already knows race
And
probably
also,
takes
it's also
whatever.
speaking to his contingency, because he's on War World when he's telling Cassandra this. So also
Yeah,
the contingency to have, like, I'm sending all these people and all these things I'm bringing. They're coming to me, like I'm saving them.
yeah,
So therefore, he has power over them because he's
exactly.
not saying, oh, send them to some random planet where we're all gonna
Yeah,
where anybody can say, oh, I rule this planet. Like, no, he owns War
yeah,
World. So he's
yeah,
like, yeah, we're gonna get them the stuff, but they coming to me. You know what I'm saying? And it
yeah,
again speaks to just like the multiple the chess games that this guy is playing, the 3-dimensional chess this guy is consistently playing. Yeah, I agree. I think that's a good way to say that. It is kind of like additional material and footnotes to like this whole story. Yeah, the Vandal Savage stuff I thought was killer. I mean, really, really compelling stuff. And like you said, it's crazy. I don't know how many times we've seen like you know, certain corners of the DC universe that Berlanti and Vietti will kind of explore, and us say like, man, they just explored this for a movie or a show or something. That would be awesome. Like it was the Bat World, whether it's now Vandal Savage's backstory.
yeah,
There's so many things. I even think Superman. I think we learned about Superman in that episode we saw a couple weeks ago. Like it's like, man, they just did something on just this stuff. Like this would be killer. So this, yeah, no, the stuff with all that was interesting. I still don't. I'm still curious about the relationship between Fate and rather Nobu really and Savage, and why he sees him as a father. Um, because
yeah, yeah. We'll learn more.
Nobu transfers his essence to a helmet. So I guess in theory Nobu was a person. So I guess he was Vandal Savage's son. I mean that's kind of crazy.
It's not. It wouldn't be a shock
I
because
mean nothing's a shock anymore. He
you got to
created Atlantis. So once you tell me he created Atlantis, I'm willing to kind of you can take me
yeah,
anywhere.
created Atlantis. He's like the first metahuman.
Yeah,
He's Apocalypse in this world.
I've seen a lot of people compare him to Apocalypse online with these episodes, and I certainly agree with that sentiment. Let's talk about the really the A story, but I really do feel like it made sense to talk about the B story more. One, I think it was the strongest by far of the stories, but also the most compelling in many ways. The B story, the A story rather, still keeps us, kind of, coming from that fight between Clarion and Zatanna and her students. Once they kind of come to, they're immediately approached by Phantom Stranger, who says, y'all gotta help Clarion. Like, he's like, stuff is going bad, and in his very, of course, mysterious way, because that's how Phantom Stranger talks. So they don't really get it or understand what he's really trying to tell them. So he's all right. Y'all don't believe me. All right, Zatanna, you go see Child kicking the hell out of Clarion and tell me if you think that that's not a problem you need to handle. And then he takes the students and brings them to Jason Blood. And Jason Blood, of course, is the alter ego of Etrigen, who Phantom Stranger basically says, look, things are going bad. We're going to need your friend to come and help us in order to figure this whole situation out. So Jason reluctantly agrees. Etrigen comes out, makes it very clear, look, if it was up to me, I would burn all of you in front of me right now. Because Etrigen's just, he's always on 10. That's always how he's always been. He's not very cuddly and cute, unless he's like a baby in the Justice League episode in Justice League Unlimited, which for you guys, so Easter egg for you there. But otherwise, he's kind of he's a prickly dude. And, Phantom Strange basically, look, man, we ain't got time for that. Like, you need to go fight these people. And he sends her off to join the fight, where right now it's just a full on battle between Child and Flaw and Clarion. We learn that Child not only comes with the power of herself, but apparently the Lords of Chaos of all of them, which I guess there are probably about 6 of them, it looks like 6 or 7. All of them have given her their abilities in an effort to take out Clarion, because essentially he is fired from his duty on Earth, because he's gone too far in terms of just being, in her words, a lapdog to Vandal Savage. I tell you what, I wrote down Child is doing some gnarly ish in this episode. I mean, they make it very clear that Clarion, who we know is a very powerful mystic, and they make it very clear one in the flashbacks, but we've seen it throughout these episodes that but in these episodes with these season 2, they make it very clear, especially in this one today, he is so badly outmatched in this fight. What did you how did you feel about how that story ended up playing out with their showdown?
I mean that part of this arc, it seems to be like the main part of the arc, hasn't really hit for me so far. I think I think it kind of comes back to like the fact that you had to explain a lot there, and there's a lot of stuff that a lot of people may not have even picked up, as when watching it, some of the details and the minutia of it. But it's interesting because, I think that the characters aren't terrible. I think that the Child and Flaw character is fine.
Yeah, I like her. Yeah.
Obviously Clarion, Shamari's not a big fan of him, but he is what he is. He's an acquired taste, but if you like him, he's a good character. So yeah, I mean, it's not necessarily the characters. I just think that, and maybe it's just in comparison from what we've gotten so far this season. We've gotten storylines that have been fairly straightforward, and this one takes a little bit more. Takes a little bit more, explaining. It takes a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, they literally have to have someone now, Vandal Savage.
Explain
the backstory of what the Lords of Order and Chaos even are, and how it connects to him and everything that's going on in this story arc.
So you're introducing characters. While Clarion and Zatanna are characters that we've obviously seen before. There's a lot of new characters. And I mean, I guess there's been a lot of new characters in each arc, but again, just a lot of new characters and a lot of new concepts that are so foreign to what we've seen so far. That it's been, it's been interesting, but it hasn't completely hit the mark. I thought that some of the banter between Clarion and the Child character were fine. I thought the Jason Blood scenes were interesting. I thought it was funny how he sort of sniffed out that Mary Brumfeld had another form.
Yeah, that was
like me.
Yeah, that was dope. I like that scene.
Hiding another form.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, certainly I think that was, some of those scenes were maybe not as interesting as the Vandal Savage scenes, and I actually think maybe some of the Miss Martian scenes were actually got me more interested.
Yeah, and we definitely have to talk about the Miss Martian scenes in a second. I think there's one thing that's very much missing from the Child Flaw kind of current Order Chaos storyline that they're doing right now, and I think it's an infusion of heart from Zatanna. Because if you think about the first two arcs, I felt like we learned a great deal about where Artemis and then where Connor and Megan were kind of in their lives, their emotional state, their emotional kind of just place in the world as these events are going on from the beginning to the end. Because of the infusion of Vandal Savage's storyline taking so much time and taking so much mental capital, and then, like you said, a very complex story that they're telling in the present day, I think in some ways it's kind of taken kind of the heart from Zatanna in terms of just forget about just like the threat. How is she feeling internally? A lot of it is her teaching these kids and kind of talking to these kids.
My guess,
we don't really know much of besides the fact, okay, she's grown to be kind of a teacher of magic, where she kind of stands emotionally and kind of it's been harder to connect to her than it has been to the other characters, and that's a little bit of a misstep because we know Artemis and Connor and Megan much better, so it's it'll take much work.
I think I have two thoughts there. I think so. One, again, you're asking why is that the case? I think it's because those characters have been featured more prominently. so we have a deeper understanding of their psyches, um, and so it's a lot easier for them to focus on those characters and for them to flesh them out because they have backstories that, I mean, in both arcs were about those two characters' backstories, and really diving into their history, and some of the storylines that they've continued to branch out from, virtually the first episode of the series. And with this, with this arc, obviously the kind of not a day one character necessarily, but what I think we will end up getting that sort of, character development from her, but I think it'll be if and when we get the infusion of Dr. Fate again. Right. And when Dr. Fate shows up and then we have that sort of thing holding over where it's like, oh, that's Zatara, and that was obviously, that's still been the best moment from her character in this series, and that arc of her character. So I think we'll start to get that character development through there. That's my prediction, but if not, then I agree. But it might be just a little bit early because it's only been 2 episodes.
Yeah, and that's I do think that's a fair point. I do think that Fate's infusion into the story, which as we see, I'm a little surprised by it. Now you don't know. Phantom Stranger is he works in mysterious ways. You don't know. You don't know. Yeah, as they keep saying on this show, you don't know if like him talking to Savage, the last episode made Savage go to Fate, with Stranger knowing that he was going to have to infuse Zatanna into the fight and knowing that somehow Zatanna and Fate were going to have to come together to end this threat. Stranger could have literally thought that many steps ahead in his very mysterious ways to come to that point. But it is interesting that, I assumed when Stranger said, okay, well, we got to bring somebody into the fight, I totally assumed he was going to go to Fate. And then when it was Jason Blood, I was like, oh, okay, this is a different angle than we thought. And then it kind of added that double whammy when Fate appears at the end talking to Vandal Savage, when you kind of assume that connection between Fate and Zatanna would be much more kind of one for one. That kind of makes more sense. So it kind of took like a little bit of a detour to get to where we got to, but eventually I think we will see those characters come together. There may be a little bit more of that emotional state. To me, like this arc feels way more like a DC movie than the first 2 arcs to me. Like the first 2 arcs to me felt more like an episodic TV show, whereas this arc feels like there's this like we don't have time to go into Zatanna's backstory and stuff. There's this threat. There's this really interesting history that you need to know to understand the threat that will tell you through backstory. But then that's kind of it. Like some of the character development you may typically get from a TV show that we're just like so used to seeing in Young Justice. I don't think we're getting quite as much because of the kind of the way they're stalling the story, where they're kind of building up really someone like Vandal Savage as opposed to who's supposed to be the main character in Zatanna. So it's kind of a interesting. It's a change of pace. I like it. I'm really enjoying it. It's a change. It definitely does feel like a change of pace still from what we.
I will say, man, I just watching this episode really hit me. Not even this episode, but just the beginning of the episode, seeing the intro and starting to understand how the season is going. That I cannot wait till they start focusing on Nightwing.
Oh man, and it's almost like. And look, I'm biased. Everybody knows I'm the Nightwing stan, and I love Aqualad as well. Like it's almost like they're saving the best for last. What I'm saying? Like when the Aqualad, and especially with some of the stuff. I mean, I assume Aqualad's next because they set up so much stuff with Atlantis in this story arc. You would imagine that maybe that would make the perfect sense to then bring us right into and we call him. To be fair, we call him Aqualad. He's really Aquaman right now.
Yeah,
it leads you right into Calder's Aquaman story arc. You would expect, what you expect to be flames and fire based on what we've learned about Atlantis, and maybe even more backstory we'll get about Atlantis through his arc. And then when we get to Nightwing, then it's a wrap. I got goosebumps right now, man. Like you're totally right. I cannot. Rocket. And we have Rocket too.
Could wind up being really cool. But,
yeah, they probably will sandwich Rocket in between Nightwing and Calder, the way I would probably see the arcs going.
Hopefully we get Icon.
I know. Yeah, we miss Icon. We haven't seen him in a minute, and I wonder. I gotta see the. I haven't watched the open. I mean, I've watched the open every time it's on, but I haven't paid attention to it in a long time. I'm wondering if are they going in order so far? Like, has it been Connor McGann? Then
No, because I think isn't Nightwing like the first one they show every
you're
time?
right. He is. So yeah, I was kind of hoping if I can find a clue.
I mean, is it in reverse order? I feel like Zatanna is like the last one, so I don't.
Yeah, I don't think it is. I don't think it's in reverse order.
But I know they show Aquaman. I mean, they show Nightwing, Aquaman, and I think they show Miss Martian. You know, so they kind of throws it off. I think Rocket and Zatanna might be like the last two they show.
Yeah, I was trying to pick up any cues or any like clues possible that may be kind of hidden somewhere. It kind of brings us to our C story real quick. We should go over. First of all, to give us kind of again another quick glimpse at Beast Boy on May 13th. You know, again now 2 months.
Did they? I didn't even catch that.
Yeah, the dates are very important. I started writing them down, so I'm like, I got it because they keep talking about time references. I'm like, it would be nice if I actually knew the time references.
I'm just saying, I missed the Beast
Boy. Yeah, no, there's a quick right before they go to McGann. It's very quick. It's like it's not even a scene. It's like 20 seconds maybe.
Frame, yeah.
And it's just it's more than a frame. It's like a couple shots, but it's Beast Boy is he's still depressed. His room is even more of a mess now than it was the last time we saw it. He's under the covers. He can't sleep. But he's on his phone looking at pictures of Connor, him, and McGann. And then the picture kind of zeroes in on McGann before transitioning us to the next day, which is McGann on the on Baby, which is, of course, their new bioship with John and with Emery, her sister. And they're traveling to Earth. They're by John's number, they're about a week away from getting to Earth. We learned that throughout the whole trip. McGann has closed off her mind to both her and John, which is obviously concerns Emery, and that even though John says, look, there's nothing really we can do. Like the only people that can really get her out of the funk she's currently in is getting the kind of love and support from her Earth family, the Dicks, the Artemises, all the people that have been so important to McGann's Earth life throughout the years we've been watching this show. And I think Emery, in some ways, I felt like Emery was like Jordan, where she was like, and I took that personally. Because Emery's like, what the hell, I'm here. Like, John's very stoic, and John's very like, look, he's very kind of thinks of things as a matter of fact. Like, there's nothing we can do. It was kind of sad, but it's like, that was his vibe. And Emery's like, nah, like, what do you mean there's nothing we can do? Or we gotta wait for these Earthlings to help.
Martian Manhunter never struck me as the emotional type.
No. He's not your your Mike Tomlin.
Not the rah-rah.
He's not your Mike Tomlin or like John Harbaugh, kind of coach. He's like your Mike Martz. He's just executing the plays. There's no more, no less than that. So Emery takes that challenge. Is all right. Well, we're gonna get her out of this funk, and she ends up kind of talking all these bad words about Earth, hoping McGann will get a rise out of her, which it does, and it leads to this fight. That actually ends up coming through with some kind of catharsis, which McGann's like, look, like, I'm a professional counselor. You think that this, like, cheap ploy at a catharsis moment with us is going to work? And then she's like, kind of like in Chop. She's like, well, it does. Because, like, they embraced and they laughed. And it was really nice to see McGann kind of have this moment. But, in that moment come immediate, sadness that she kind of really kind of comes to grips with, that she's going back home without Connor in her eyes forever, and that while home is Earth for her now, a big piece of that is gone. So, how did you feel about how the McGann story played out today?
Yeah, I mean, it was. I thought it was interesting. I thought we saw some. We got deeper into the psychology there. I mean, these are things that they could have shown you the next episode after Connor died, and now we're getting it. 5-6 episodes later.
2 months after he died. And I like that we're getting some time references to kind of figure out,
right?
How Beast Boy is feeling, how she's feeling, how really,
it's unique storytelling to wait so long in the series, in terms of episodes to finally sort of get this, not resolution, but get this, perspective. And I mean, I can't really say it's a right way or wrong way of doing it. I just think that it's interesting, and I think that Um, you know, it's cool. I'm gonna say it's cool, but it's good now to see how that played out from her perspective and start to really dive in. But yeah, obviously a sad story. I continue to think they're gonna draw this out a little bit. I don't think we're gonna get a quick turnaround. I don't think it'll be nearly as long as Wally's eventual return, but I think it'll be. I think it will be a little bit. I don't think they can just turn around and then, uh, you know, 2 episodes from now we see Superboy back. Was there like another ship or something like that? What was
Well, they're
that?
on Baby. Remember, the other ship, Bioship, is retired essentially.
Well, no, but like, weren't they like disrupted by another ship in this? In
Oh,
the
so if you'll remember, and I don't know, like yeah, that was weird. Like it was a school bus. I think that my thought was remember when in the last episode when they were on the merry-go-round that ended up going through Manhattan to get to Madame Xanadu. Remember they were like they somehow got into the street. They almost got hit by the school bus.
oh,
I
okay,
think
yeah.
Zatanna had like sent the school bus away or used magic, but I mean, she might have sent them into space. It seems like, which is kind of
Interesting.
scary. Hopefully, they'll make it back. I gotta watch that scene again.
Are there people in there? I would assume
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
like
That
a
was. I
team.
think it was the same bus driver. Like I think it was everything. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah. Again, I
yeah.
don't forgive me if I'm wrong, YJ fans. But I'm pretty sure that's what happened. This episode, I'm doing this review on a one watch, as opposed to most of the time I usually do it on two. But yeah, that was I thought that was like a running joke to like, you know, this bus keeps getting in people's way. I mean, Zatanna used her magic to move the bus. I think she sent it again off world. um, no, so again, I thought that it was kind of a nice little C plot. It wasn't like they spent like a bunch of time, but just again, Connor's death continues to kind of loom large over this series, and unlike what happened with Wally, where he dies, and then we didn't have a show, so we didn't really deal much with it, and then it came back years later, but because it was years later, they had to move forward, so we didn't really deal with it as much. Here where it's like, okay, major stuff happens, like we really actually see these characters deal with it in a major way. So the fact that he continues to still loom large, I think also still, as you said, probably increases the chances that he will return. And I told you guys from the beginning,
Yeah,
I
I mean,
totally think that he was saved by the Legion of Superheroes.
yeah,
Um,
that story, yeah, makes total sense. And I think that them hammering home this his death is only makes it more likely. Not to say that he's a major character, so obviously it would have a major impact on all these characters, the main original character, but at the same time, I kind of feel like
and even the
them.
fact that he's still in the open, like he's in the open every week, like
Yeah, it's kind of
Superboy
bizarre.
played. I don't think they say played by anybody, but like
Yeah,
he's not dead. You know what I'm saying?
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Like they weren't promoting Wally.
You wouldn't put
They
that in
weren't
there.
promoting Wally West in season 3 of Young Justice. You know what I'm saying? He was
Right.
done.
Yeah, you wouldn't put that in there if knowing that, yeah, he ain't gonna make it out of episode 4.
Yeah.
That wouldn't make sense.
I think though this is probably a good time to give scores here. Now, shout out to our boy Shamari. Of course, he's usually with us. He had to step out for this week. The COVID booster shot. Not feeling so great, but he wanted you guys to know he gave this episode an 8 for a score this week. So, of course, shout out to our guy Sham. We hope he feels better and will be with us sometime next week. Kendall, I'll give it to you. What do you give this week's episode of Young Justice, episode 10, Nomed Esir?
I'll go 7. I thought it was a solid episode. I liked the Vandal Savage stuff a lot. Um, I think he's a character that, again, could get his own show, could get his own movie. You know, I also thought that he kind of gave me strong vibes in terms of his outfits to the Immortal character in Invincible. With his get up in this episode. But yeah, no, I mean, I think that I thought this was a good episode. I thought again that was supposed to be the main storyline with Clarion and the Witch Boy and the Witch Girl ended up leaving a little bit to be desired, so I can only give it a 7. But overall, I thought it was a solid episode.
Yeah, I mean, I like this episode probably a lot more than you. I'll go. I'll go 8. I kind of wanted to go 8.5. That's how much I love the Vandal Savage stuff. Like the Vandal Savage stuff to me was like a 9.5. Like I thought it was that stellar. But the other stuff was good, not great. I didn't think it was bad, but like again, for me, like the B plot, it very much runs like the A plot. But because it's the B plot, I think you can't kind of maybe elevate the episode the way you would maybe like. So I'll give this an 8. The Vandal stuff was stellar. I thought that the McGann stuff was like a nice little third story in there to kind of give us something to break away so much from. Especially because the Lords of Order, like you said, the Lords of Order, Lords of Chaos, this very intense backstory that goes back millennia ago. It's a lot to follow. I love it. I enjoy it. But I think that the McGann insertion was like perfect because it was like, okay, something I can kind of very clearly understand and something that's very simple and kind of raw. I think it was a perfect insertion as a third story to kind of get us somewhat out of the minutia of some of the stuff we were trying to deal with the main storylines. I'm not again. I don't hate Clarion at all the way Shamari does, and the main storyline was fine. Again, I think the only thing is missing for me. I think the villain is certainly feels dangerous enough. I think the only thing it's really missing is Zatanna, the heart with Zatanna, and I think that we need to see Child probably do some damage to like someone who's like super powered. We saw her sadistic, deconstruction of the human from last week, and we see her, doing rock tsunamis and crazy things like that against, but Clarion, being as powerful as he is, he doesn't get, seriously harmed yet dealing with Child, though it seems like that was maybe inevitable. We probably want to get a little bit more of that. I think Etrigen's a good addition. He's great in every, mystical kind of story. Yeah. Any kind of Justice League Dark kind of esque story. He's just the right person to call. I was so happy when he was there. I was like, oh, perfect. This is like he's there all the time, but he's always fun. So having him there will add some color to the fight. So good episode. I think it was a really good episode. Maybe an underrated episode. I'm not sure how other people feel about it. I think I liked it a lot more than most people. I give it an 8. Any last thoughts, Kendall, before we head out?
No,
it seemed like you were thinking. So I was gonna do the close, but I was like, well, let me give Kendall one more crack.
No, I feel like we're heading down. I would assume I'm guessing this will be another 4-episode arc. And we'll end out with 4 episodes, and that will be so that will be 2 more in this arc. And that I guess would lead us into a hiatus.
Yeah, so there's a hiatus that goes until spring. I don't think there's been a date yet for when they come back from spring. But the end of December will be the end of, the first half of Young Justice. I know, shout out to Greg Berlanti. I know he said that they finished all the episodes. Weissman. Jesus. I said Berlanti. Oh, well, Weissman, I know he said that they completed all the episodes like maybe like a couple weeks ago or last week. Finally, they completed them all. They're all done in the can. So they're all set to go. It's just a matter of when they get dropped. We know, again, the plan right now is for that to be in the spring. It's going to be a long winter, not having Young Justice.
Yes.
But I give you guys plenty of time. If you haven't watched Young Justice yet, you want to catch up on those shows and maybe then go back to some of these other reviews we've done and try to pick up on what we've been talking about. You'll get some time to do that. So there's some silver lining there. But yeah, we're trying.
Can't give Greg Berlanti credit for everything.
yeah. I think we definitely would prefer to just get this 24. Though I don't know. I could use a little break. The 24-week marathon every week. I could use a little bit of a downtime to do some other stuff here in New Generation Media. But we still hope you guys are enjoying our Young Justice reviews, of course. Make sure you check us out every week with our reviews of Young Justice. That'll do it now, though, for this video. Thank you guys for checking us out. For Kendall, I'm EJ. Take it easy, guys. Peace.